I'm alive. Okay. Right. We're joined today by Lyndsey Caldwell, who is a head of English, head of department, teacher of English, obviously, and is going to talk to us about vocabulary, something that, you know, she's had a lot of success with, and something that I think probably many of us are noticing more. There's a deficit with certain students in our groups that we want to resolve, and that's right across the ability range. So thank you very much for offering to help out with this, Lyndsey. That's great. So first of all, how do you select the vocabulary that you're going to teach explicitly? Because I think that's a challenge for a lot of people. It's kind of which words are priority.
Yeah. I'm going to go back a step though to something that you said about, you know, kind of key students really not having enough vocabulary. And really it arose from question 3 on the AQA language paper, which is about thoughts and feelings, and being there with kids in classes, trying to say, you know, trying to move them up from sad or happy or depressed or angry, and then just not having the vocabulary to be able to to actually form a decent answer. And that isn't then about answering GCSE, it's about them being able to articulate their feelings in life, you know. So there's a bigger kind of social aspect to vocabulary rather than, you know, just sort of improving English language.
100%.
And it was really, you kind of think, how are you going to be able to articulate your feelings in your relationships if you can only talk about being sad, happy, angry, or depressed. So it rose from that really. So lots of then reading about vocabulary, Kewan's Bringing Words to Life is brilliant. Absolutely, highly recommend that book. And so how we went about selecting them then was we had a whole day of inset where we sat down as a whole faculty and we looked at the words that we need for our units. Now we only have 2 units a year, so that makes that easier to be able to select the language that you need in order that you're going to, that links to the topics that you're doing, and then be able to give students that multiple exposure that they need in order to be able to use more sophisticated vocabulary and learn it as well, actually learn and use it.
Yeah, so I kind of want to stop you there a little bit, because this idea of 2 units a year, I think probably to most people is terrifying, exciting, incredibly promising. What's the rationale behind that, and how does that help with the vocabulary side of things?
Well, the rationale is that actually is learning something more in depth rather than having a breadth and no depth. Really, is what was kind of rooted in. So then, this is at Key Stage 3 as well. I should probably point that out. And actually, as the years have gone on, that was fine. So then it's based in genre actually. So we do all of our non-fiction and creative writing kind of rooted in those different genres.
Right. Okay. So real depth then, kind of going into the context through non-fiction, creative writing through the. Okay. Wow.
So all the non-fiction builds into the knowledge. So for Year 7, for example, and Christmas Carol, they look at the topic, they learn about topic, convention, and the genre, and then they learn all their non-fiction stuff is about the poor laws or some travel writing actually from Dickens and biographical information and lots of different routes in, and that does allow us to focus on some key words that are useful, not just for understanding A Christmas Carol actually, because it's really difficult, but also then to be able to write about it. So just stripping it back to what are the words. Actually, I read A Christmas Carol and I just went through and looked at the words, made a list of the words, you know, that they wouldn't understand, and you get, there's quite a lot. And
I
then,
made a list of the words I couldn't understand. It was pretty long. It was,
yeah.
I mean,
Actually, we had to teach them the word ruddy because it appears so often in the
yeah. So,
novel.
so is that a factor then in selecting the words? Are you thinking, oh, these genre-specific words are tier 2, or these genre-specific words are in Christmas Carol and they'll be useful for the creative writing? Is there a sense of here's the 20% that can do 80% of the work? Is that the kind of?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, so that we came together as a faculty in the first stage for this whole day, and we did the what words do they need to know. We looked at tier 2 vocabulary and what that was, and we did a kind of blend of words in the text that they'd really need to know, and then words that are just kind of useful. So for example, crooks in Of Mice and Men, and the word bitter, and being able to talk about crooks as feeling bitter, and that having a really precise meaning and what that meant, and then being able to analyse it, as well as then the other words that you might get in the text to be able to just actually understand some of the key ideas.
Yeah. I mean, that links back to what you were saying earlier, the idea that actually it's a cultural importance as well. You know, this is important in terms of society. If they can't go out and express the feelings that they have,
Yeah.
huge disadvantage. I mean, I'd actually, to be perfectly honest with you, Lyndsey, I'd never thought about it from that side of things. But if you can't say to the person that you love, I feel deeply concerned about this at the moment, or I'm still feeling bitter
I
about.
feel resentful. You know, those kinds of words, or remorse. You know, it's got to be, you know, but you need those words to be able to understand the text. But also, they've got a value that goes beyond literature, that's important for them in life. You know,
and that's at the very heart of the subject we teach, isn't it? If you're not growing as a person at the end of a book, there's something wrong with the book, or there's something wrong with you. So I don't mean wrong as in but do you know what I mean? There's something. That's what we're supposed to be doing, isn't it? So I love that. I'm really pleased that you shared that thought, because I genuinely it never crossed my mind, even though I know what I feel the purpose of literature is. And I've seen those couples on the street screaming at each other saying, I hate you, and just throwing things at each other. And you think, you probably don't hate them.
No.
Maybe you could express that in a different way, and there might be some growth. So that's something I've never thought about. That's a whole life lesson. So I'm going to go back down to practicalities and stop being so philosophical. I'm sorry.
So I'll go back to where we were. So we took all the words, and then we've obviously got a limited time frame in order to teach them. So we've got 10 words a fortnight. That's what we teach. 10 words a fortnight. So then we strict it then to be able, what are the most important words then to be able to fit into these units. So 9 or 10 weeks of vocabulary testing. Oh, it's 8 altogether actually. I think it's 8 for unit 1 and 9 for unit 2. The way the weeks work out. So then stripping that back and working out what are the most important words, and then actually, because we've been doing it a little while now, we make sure that we're using the words as well in our models, in our language when we're talking about the text. This year, actually, we've got the words, and it's a really simple thing but really effective for the teachers, actually, as well as the students, is to just have the words on the wall for 2 weeks for year 7, 8, and 9. So that as a teacher, when you're teaching, you can look and say, right, okay, and using the vocabulary to enable that multiple exposure.
That's brilliant. That's so simple but so brilliant. So the walls, you're here, the wall's there, and the wall, the 10 words for year 7.
There you go. There are so it's so helpful and useful for them. Now they have, in terms of practicality, they have like a vocabulary book. I'm not sure if you can see out there.
Yeah.
And then they have, so it's just all set out what words. So they know the week that they're going to be tested on the side, and they've got the word. So that goes home to parents, actually, through every student bulletin, every fortnight. and that goes there to tutors and stuff. So they know what they're going to be tested on in advance. But those booklets are then, they also have those in the lessons when they're writing. So you can have the vocab words there. And then we as teachers actually are using them go into the vocabulary words when we're writing our models and thinking about our explanations and trying to make sure that we use the vocabulary as well. It's that repeated exposure that's so important in getting them to.
I mean, just from a form tutor's point of view, you know, we've in year 10 just introduced a Christmas Carol knowledge organiser that we're all explicitly teaching with. I was going to say with is probably a better term, but as a form tutor over year 10, it then becomes really easy to sort of say, right, today we're going to do a little bit of quizzing on your knowledge organiser. And I can do the quiz, and I could do the quiz if I was a non-specialist, certainly, because all I'm doing is covering, asking, and that's it. And that then means that you have a coherence, not just departmentally, but whole school, where form tutors can help those students they know who are struggling to achieve what they should be achieving or could achieve.
So our next steps for us actually would be then to look at other subjects and how we might get other faculties to bring the language into what they're teaching as well, so that it's not just that vocabulary is English as well. It's about giving you greater access to all the subjects actually.
Yeah. And I spoke to Nick Wells the other week about creative writing, and he said that his geography students on the, I don't know if you remember the AQA question, I think it was like a cliff face, and he said his geography students, the description that they gave of this cliff face, it was one of their SAMS ones, the geography students far outstripped, they put them in 2 columns, and they outstripped them. Why? They've got more knowledge, they've got more vocabulary in that area, so there's huge crossover to be had actually. I've noticed a lot of really good creative writing come on natural topics when a geography student, you know, talking about cliffs fissuring, and I think, what a lovely phrase. But to them, it's second nature. Yeah.
There was an interesting one in the SAMS material actually that was about snow. And of course, our students haven't seen snow since they were 10. You know, so that there's a geographical split in your own experiences as well that creates a divide as well. I'd be really interested to see how that, if you live in Manchester where it snows more frequently and buses stop, how well you then write about snow causing economic disruption. So in the non-fiction writing, you know,
I'm on the south coast now, and thinking back to sort of my school and my friends who've children going to school, you know, the question this summer that was a London bus, nightmare. They've never been to London. Why would they go to London? Manchester's on the doorstep, you know. To them, that would be an illogical thing to do. But if you're in the southeast, why wouldn't you go to London, you know? So virtually all the children I teach went, oh, it was great. It was a London bus. I've had a journey on a London bus. Whereas I know for a fact that in Preston and Manchester, you know, they wouldn't have had that experience. And the same probably had it been a snow question on the south coast. They would have been kind of saying, what, you know, so
it's a real,
it's impossible.
Not the knowledge is the key, isn't it?
Yeah. So you've spoken a little bit there about this, we've spoken a bit about the divide in knowledge. Do you sort of pay lip service to a sort of different start point, or do you have a sort of route for different start points for this? Because obviously we have, you know, we have to think about things like the
no, not really actually. I mean, so some of the words aren't, so our route to different start points are that some of the words aren't that unfamiliar.
Okay.
So for example, if I talk about Osmosis again, the word isolation, and they know the word isolation, partly because if they get into trouble, they get put in isolation. But it's not just about knowing and learning the word. It's also about using the word in your writing. So we've thought about our start point in the creation of the word, so that there's kind of a mix between sort of some relatively easy ones and some that are more difficult. To kind of move that along a bit. But it's the key thing it's not just about learning the words, it's about using the words. and using that in your analysis or understanding what the word means when you see it written down. So that's kind of where we get our start point. We'd obviously, as if a student's only getting 5 out of 10, say, in their test, because they do get tested every fortnight, then you'd obviously have some sympathy. You'd manage it on the individual. So if there's a TA, they'd get that read to, where they might explain some of the meaning. So they get a little, I've got them here actually, they get a little tiny multiple choice test, okay? So it's really easy for the teacher. It's really quick to record. It happens in the final lesson of week 2. So it's, there's a system in place. But then if there are some students who are really you don't want to make them feel bad. That's the other thing. But it's those students. From my point of view, those students who really need to know the words. They're the ones who are really massively benefiting them from increasing their vocabulary. So it happens on a kind of student by student basis. And
okay. I've this year had my kids audit themselves, my students audit themselves on the words that they've encountered before, can use before we start. And then that way, when I'm giving kind of feedback on their scores on vocabulary quizzes, I'm kind of saying, you've progressed by 3. That's great. Yeah. So that there's loads of different approaches out there that kind of can give them that confidence. Rather than saying 3 out of 10 and the whole class sort of that. You've progressed by 3.
Well, they just record the marks in the back of their book.
Oh, okay.
So the teacher then actually, you can just see what they were getting. So often you can see if they've not learned it for their homework actually.
Right.
And there's a bit of a drop. So it's easy. It's quite discreet as well. It's not. It's only really the teacher who sees that.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of done a little bit of that kind of tell me your score sort of thing. Chris Runicles said something on someone I follow on Twitter is a history teacher, and he says that he literally just says, any who got higher than such and such thing, or put your hands up for such and such thing. I can't remember exactly how he said it. This is my adaptation, I think. But then you're kind of in your mind looking, well, who's at what point? But this year I kind of did that thing of progressing, so I'll see how it goes. I mean, their feedback on how that felt emotionally is probably most useful there.
Yeah, I think mostly they don't mind if they're wrong, and they know when they're wrong, and they want to be better. If they feel like they're not performing very well over a long period of time, I suppose you just need to be a bit mindful of them.
So what sort of methods do you use to teach the vocabulary then?
So it's taught really explicitly. So we have, teachers do it different ways actually. So some people have whole vocab lessons where they teach the 10 words in one go as a vocabulary lesson, looking at get them to talk actually a lot. So we teach it as a language. It's a language. I was fortunate enough to have a free period when there was a language lesson in one of the English rooms. So I'd hear them all, go, whoa, 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 where the teacher would say, whoa, 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 and that, teaching of language, and that's really important to remember we're teaching a language. So we say the words, we give them the definition, and then we get them to say it all together. So they say it in that same way that you see so frequently in language lessons. I thought that they wouldn't like that very much, to be honest, and they might feel a bit awkward about it. But actually, if they're all in on it, it's fine. What it really does is expose how many of them can't. Some kids who you'd think would be able to read the words actually can't read them. So cynical, for example, with lots of because when it comes up on the board, they're trying to say it. So it's a language
So explicitly teaching the words, asking them to elaborate on those words, so sort of taking ownership of those words, but also
so they have a question then based on, so you might say, in what way is Macbeth hubristic? So talk about that using the word. Has there ever been a time where you might have been, you know, overconfident or acted in a hubristic way? So it's getting them to use it in their speech actually, and say the word over and over again, and then they do a little bit of writing on it. Now that could be a bit of creative writing, it might be a summary, it might be an analytical paragraph, but then those words being repeated over the next few weeks and actually through the course of the unit as well, helps them with that knowledge and understanding of the words. It's really interesting as a teacher trying to explain why some words work in different ways as well. So it's been really good for my own subject knowledge actually, in explaining. I can't think of any examples of this. Sometimes students say things and it actually you really have to think about why they don't work in a certain way. I actually can't think of an example, but it does kind of really make you go, okay, yes, so why doesn't that work?
Yeah. I mean, I've just found that this week I was teaching that scan all poems nettles, and sort of student with a you know, pretty high start point said to me, sob, what does that mean? I thought, oh, you don't, you know, and then the levels then to know when sob would be the right word to use in your own writing, what sort of emotions that would be, what a sob looks like. There's a lot of levels just on such a, I mean, it's a monosyllabic word. You know, so actually you've kind of touched on quite a few things there that are pretty significant and worth us all kind of keeping in mind. And I like what you said there about actually it is about retrieval. They need to be able to use these words.
And also kind of be able to work things out. If they know about prefixes and some kind of etymology stuff, then actually it's, you know, they can see how. We had a really good discussion the other day about submissive and sub and what that meant, and you know, so yeah, it's kind of very similar. You know, it's class.
Yeah.
Getting them to understand bits of words and how that crosses over between them.
Because I certainly find myself encountering new words and using that skill of, well, what's that prefix mean? Where have I seen that elsewhere? What's that suffix mean? So we'd be rude not to teach them that, really, wouldn't we?
Yeah. It's actually, it really helps you think about how English is so hard. It is so hard. And it's really interesting to be able to struggle with that a bit with them as well, you know, and to, why doesn't that work? You know, and really think about it and find the answer together, I suppose, and explain it.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
And you've kind of, there's so many doors I want to sort of open up, and I need to limit myself a little bit. You've talked a little bit about how you explicitly teach the students to learn the words in the first instance. How do you teach a method for them to explicitly learn? Is there a kind of cover and check thing that you do with that
So we
booklet,
do
or is there...
look, say, cover, check as a way of learning and trying to learn spelling as well. So with our more vulnerable students, they then have like flashcards with vocab and be expected to turn it over with the definition on one side, the word on the other, and be able to excuse me, be able to retrieve that.
Yeah. So
we're lucky enough actually to have extra English lessons. So our Key Stage 3 intervention is an additional English lesson where they pre-learn often or overlearn the stuff that they will be doing in their mainstream lessons. Because we teach mixed ability right the way through. That's also important. So they do that actually in these extra English lessons.
So I mean, actually, again, we're not talking. When we were discussing beforehand, I said you're going to have to reveal the magic secret. You know, and you said it's not magic.
There's no magic. It's quite yeah. And but what's interesting is how actually refined, how, you know, how you become. We're refining it now. It's not perfect. What we do isn't perfect, but it's like, you know, seeing the different ways in which you can improve vocabulary. So yeah, there's no magic secret. Systems.
Being systematic, keeping it nice and simple, picking the right words, and teaching them well. I've put a question that I don't really understand now why I've put that, but I'll ask you anyway, and we'll see what happens. Have there been? I know what I was thinking. I've just worked it out as I'm asking it now. Whenever you kind of do something, there's a sort of cost-effects sort of ratio, isn't there? And I've put here, are there any negative effects to this practice? So
right.
Are you losing out on anything?
Well,
it's silly to ask now.
We lose a bit of time, you know, but and that's where having 2 units means that, you know, that so is better. So we do lose some time, and some people struggled with it at first. So kind of, you know, there was an implementation dip. You know, like, you know, it felt clunky. Didn't quite know, you know, how it would. You know, we weren't quite sure whether or not they'd like it, and there was actually a feeling that they might not like it, and there was a bit of kind of trepidation about that. I think no. I think there are some kids who know the words, but then I don't think there's anything wrong with making sure that they use the words in what they're writing, and actually just having a greater kind of focus on vocabulary.
And I think as your starting point, you know, that there will inevitably be things like that. Well, hold on, this small percentage of students know those 10, so next year, what are we going to do about that? But I think that's part of the process, isn't it?
So we might look at ways we can make them find synonyms for each word for homework, or you know, different things that we could do with them. I think really just having that focus on the vocabulary at the moment is what's important. Ways we can refine it would be.
So one of the issues there is that kind of new shoes thing. Is the sort of getting used to the pace of the units, 2 units across time, but actually there are some certain things that need a little adjusting, a little edit here and there, but actually, silly question here, wasn't it?
Well, no, not really, because actually that there was quite a lot of fear. Not fear. Funnily enough, my vocab failed me. It, you know, a sort of sense of trepidation about how well it was going to go with something new. It felt quite big. It was we couldn't, you know, how it was going to fit in. Is it bolt on? Is it, you know? So there's been that us learning how to make that as integrated into the unit, and then that's followed on then into Key Stage 4 and 5 as well, in actually how we teach it. Saying the word with them is so important, and getting them to say it all together. It's brilliant, you know. I am going to quickly tell you about my favourite moment of it, though.
Please do.
And this justifies all of it, I feel. I went to watch one of these extra English lessons with Year 9, and it was looking at Act 2, Scene 2 with Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. And this boy put his hand up, and he was like, "Oh yes, she's emasculating him, isn't she, sir?" And it was like wow, that you know, these are our most vulnerable kids in the year group, and that, and then the rest of them, oh yes. You know, so it was that they were reminded of that word, and it was a real moment in terms of this is the right thing to do.
Because I think sort of when I came into teaching, it was in a phase of, you know, are they having fun? And if they are, then everything else will work out. And there was a sort of reverse snobbery. I remember teaching semantic fields to Year 7, being absolutely derided in this observation feedback. They don't need to know that. That's A level. Oh, you know, why are you wasting their time? They haven't learnt it anyway. You know, at the end of the lesson, they haven't learnt it, so I'd fail. But there's nothing about these words that are intrinsically, you know, only for this section of society.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Once you reach this IQ point, then you can learn what emasculating means.
Yeah.
That's, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah. So it was a real, there was a real pride in that, being able to use that word, and then all these other kids. Oh yeah,
yeah,
it was. We don't need to. It's a bit like that starting point thing. Is we also, high expectations are really important, and having that mix of, you know, more kind of obvious words, and then really. Because it is mixed ability teaching, so we do want to really extend those teachers as well. But that moment was a delight, actually.
yeah. And I think, you know, it is culture transformation, that, because as soon as he says that or she says that and the group go, oh yes,
Yes.
that's not just they've learnt a word. We know as professionals that that is culture shift.
Yeah.
Not only do we all know that word, we all like that you've remembered it, we all like that you know how to use it, and we're with you. And then
And recognise your pride in remembering that. You know, there was
yeah,
it was a real, there was a pride there that was important.
that's absolutely brilliant. And you know, that is enough to encourage anybody to explicitly sort of make that list, set off on that journey, and follow what you've done, because actually there are you know, areas in all of our practice that we need to work on. And for some people it will be vocabulary, and you know, I kind of teach vocabulary pretty explicitly in my lessons, but you've mentioned quite a few tips here. You know, I'm definitely going to take away that idea of words on the back. It's super simple.
Yeah.
I'm going to put it in a book. Why didn't I do that before? You know, but I've always had this concern in the back of my mind, and I don't want to finish on a concern. It'd be great to finish on that story, but I did want to just clarify this with you. I thought you might have a take on it. I always worry about those common misspelt words. Do I miss out any time on those for trying to teach these tier 2 words? You know, the kind of, I often will.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Trying to get everything in that you want to get in. I think it's addressing that in the same way that you would. You know, we do that green pen mark, you know, feedback lessons rather than marking the book for Key Stage 3. So, and commonly misspelt words come up there. But yeah, if you know, there's so much of it. It's so complex. How do you find the most important thing? And I suppose, from my own perspective, them being able to, it goes back to what we said at the beginning, them being able to express themselves eloquently when they leave school, is really is the most important thing, I think.
Yeah, and we can't do everything, but actually you've said there you've got a place in specifically in your sequence of lessons whereby they are going to get a little bit of time to tackle those words that they commonly misspell and are generally misspelled. So we can't do everything. We have to tackle what's in front of us, and you know, have to work outwards from there. But you know, I'm thinking back. You said there at one point, I didn't think they'd go for it. They loved it, and I think to anyone sort of at the end of this kind of still thinking, oh, I don't know. I think that story at the end there is absolutely brilliant. And I've got a very similar story about poetry by heart. I taught Sonnet 116 by heart last year, and I thought, really challenging group. Other teachers from around the school were coming to sort of watch me teach them to see if I had some magic secret I didn't. And I thought, well, this one will be a disaster. And I even put in my diary, this is really negative of me, but I thought, save some time for detentions. I put a little note. Poetry by heart, they loved. Vocabulary, they loved. There's something about being told, here's something to learn, here's us practicing it. At the end of it, you will practice it and you will be successful. That they love, of course they would. So not being afraid, I think, is my big takeaway, as well as the practicalities, but not being afraid of anything that we know is for the greater good. So thank you very much, Lyndsey. That is incredibly useful to all of us, and really, really grateful for you for joining us today. And I hope that other people have taken away from that. Lyndsey doesn't do an awful lot on Twitter. She's not sort of self-promoting or anything like this, but everyone who went to a recent research ed talk has sort of emailed me and and sent me direct messages saying, please get Lyndsey on, please get Lyndsey on. So real privilege actually to have Lyndsey with us today. As I said, she's not going to be the person sort of singing her own praises. She is the person who is getting on with it. So absolutely brilliant. And thank you very much for joining us, Lyndsey. We'll leave it there.